Welcome back, everybody. So I've been away. I had a just over week-long vacation, and it was really needed. But we are back, and we're going to talk about what has happened in the last couple of weeks. This past weekend, we saw all the major outlet stores now being able to sell the new set Azurite Sea. So I expect these next coming weeks to truly define what our meta is. However, we had quite a few really big tournaments, and I'm kind of curious, so I put it all. We have the spreadsheet linked down below with all this great information. We'll start a new tab moving into December so we can see which trends the meta decides to take. And now that we have an updated format, you know what that means. We get to bring back our deck profiles using these lists, breaking it down, common staples, common cards, tech cards, all that good information by tried, true, proven deck lists. I will put all that information for you guys together so you don't have to go search for it. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. And while we're at it, when we hit 5,500 subscribers, we're doing a case giveaway. Let's see if we can do it before set 7, and then we'll give a case of set 7 away. If we don't quite get there, well, I like you guys, so we're just going to set a new goal and push it back a little bit, but we are going to give away our second case on this channel. So again, hit that button, and without further ado, what decks are performing? Well, is it a surprise or is it not a surprise? Ruby Sapphire Popsicle is the #1 deck. It took up about 18%. Which decks did I take for this event, or for this total, by the way? Anything over 25 players, I counted into this chart. If it was 25 to 40 players, I took the top 4. If it was 41 to 100 players, I took the top 8. 100 to 250, top 16. And in the event that we have events that go over 250, like a challenge, then we will take top 32 to 64 based on the size of those events. So that being said, there was nothing over 250 players, but there was a couple that were pretty close. One was in like the 230s, I believe it was. But we got top 16 from quite a few events. We saw Popsicle take up 23 out of the 125 total tops, otherwise 18% being the top dog. Amber Steel, one of the few Amber Steel decks. Amber Steel Song, 19 out of 125, 15%. Ruby Amethyst and Emerald Steel Discard rounding out our top 4 decks. These are the decks that proved to be tier 1 and the 13 and 12% respectively for Ruby Amethyst and Emerald Steel Discard. Do I expect this to change? I really don't. I did a couple weeks ago already my prediction tier list for this coming format, and all 4 of these decks I said we're going to continue to be tier 1, and in the early goings we see that they are still tier 1. Steel Song typically starts out a little bit slower, so to see it up this high early on is actually kind of cool. I guess last format they did too, and Popsicle then just came storming in. This time we're just like, yeah, we're going to skip that first little rough in period and just get right to the chase. Popsicle, Steel Song right there at the top. Then Discard obviously coming in to help counter the Popsicle, and Ruby Amethyst is that well-rounded, balanced 4th option that we have. These 4 really make that triangle format with Ruby Amethyst just sitting there ready to strike. I think it's overall a pretty healthy game. I think a healthy format. I'm pretty excited for where we're going. We see a lot of random decks that we're going to kind of talk about. Each category we get to, like tier 1, tier 2, rogue, I'll kind of talk about some decks and if I think that they're good enough to continue, and are there any decks that I think can make it onto here that have not done so yet. And I do think that there are some, so we're going to continue to talk about it a little bit longer. The top 4 tier 1, I think all 4 of them are still going to be tier 1 threats. I don't see any of them falling off. Emerald Steel Discard, pretty well figured out at this point. They got a couple new cards, so we might see a little fluctuation in there. But overall, that deck is just very, very strong at what it does. Again, Ruby Amethyst, couple new tools. Overall, though, consistency, power, top end. Steel Song and Popsicle, too. Just a couple little tweak cards here and there. Maybe we see ratios changing a little bit as we move forward. But overall, these 4 decks are just too good at what they do. So our first tier 2 deck is Amethyst Emerald AE Tempo, and maybe this deck dropped a slight amount. It's in that 9% range at 11. If it had 1 to 2 more tops, it would hit that 10%. I don't know where the rounding number, probably 2 more. 1 would give it just under. But a lot of aggressive strategies are actually starting to pop up as smaller numbers. And if you look further down the list, there is Amethyst Emerald Agro with 3. And if you put those 3 here, Amethyst Emerald is a tier 1 deck. However, the tempo to the aggro, the strategies of the deck, maybe not in the early turns don't differ that much, but as the game progresses, tempo really isn't as diehard. I need to win by turn 5, 6. And tempo offers that more mid-range to it, whereas the aggro version is really by turn 6, you truly want to close the game out or be in that, I'm going to play a goat, I'm going to play a white rose, I'm going to play a gathering knowledge and wisdom. I'm going to play something like that to close this game out off the top of the deck. So tempo comes in as our first tier 1 deck, or sorry, tier 2 deck. We already did our tier 1s. And then our first aggro deck, actually, Amber Amethyst Move Over. Sorry about that. Amber Amethyst Move Over. Is this the format that Amethyst Steel aggro becomes the best aggro card or aggro deck of the format? Whether you can actually play around with some locations here. You have the Tinkerbell, which actually enables the Tinkerbell shift line. The one that is the 1/3 evasive, basically Minnie Mouse Surfer that just came out for Amethyst. And there's a lot of other good things that Amethyst and Steel have going for it right now. And we've been seeing the aggro strategy doing really well and getting quite a few top 8s and 4s in these bigger events. And it even took first place in one of them, coming in with 7% of the top cut. Sapphire Steel, so blue steel, this is the Zoolander wheel, no wheel, whatever way you want to go about it. We'll see how it shakes out when we do our deck breakdown of the common ratios and cards. 6, and then Amber Steel, again, our second Amber Steel deck, the aggro version, also at 6. This is the one where it's not like full-on locations. However, you do play like the Dwarf Mine and some of the other aggressive cards, and then you can move them to the mine and just ping damage to your opponent to help protect your questing characters. We see both of these decks coming in at that 5% range. Then Amethyst Steel. So 2 Amethyst Steel decks in the tier 2 category. This one's the more mid-range control, where you're more playing the fairies, the Tinkerbell shift lines, the Beast Tragic Heroes, the Robin Hoods, what have you. More of that top-end mid-game type game where you're not full-on aggressive, kind of like the difference between tempo and aggro in Amethyst Emerald. Amethyst Steel kind of does the same thing, where how aggressive do you want to be? However, it seems that the aggro version of this color combination is overperforming the more mid-range control aspect like the other one. 4% overall top cut there. Then we've kind of talked about it a couple times. Amethyst Emerald aggro, 2%. And as we round it off, Amethyst Steel, Jafar Wheel. 3 Amethyst Steel decks in tier 2. Jafar Wheel. Jafar is here, and it's no longer in Rogue. It is finally tier 2. Will it stay there? I hope it does. I truly hope it does. And then we have Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro still holding on to that tier 2 category. So looking over the tier 2 decks now, we got Tempo. Absolutely, this deck is going to stay tier 2 at the minimum. It has potential to even move up to tier 1. Do I think it's going to? It was my most likely to fall to tier 2, but I don't want to discount it out just yet. I think it's still very strong. Amethyst Steel aggro. I was a little lower on this. I said high rogue to low tier 2. It's proving to actually be pretty high tier 2, so it's a little higher than I had expected. Do I think it holds? I think it actually might. It might stay in that like mid tier 2 range. I don't think it's going to fall to the bottom with like that 2%. It'll probably stay in like that 4 to 6% range. I would not be surprised to see that. Then we see Blue Steel coming in at 5%. I think Blue Steel will creep up. I think Blue Steel is going to go up closer to that like 8-9% range of overall top cut. It's just a deck that's really hard to pilot, especially in the early format when everything's settling. Once the format settles a little, I think Blue Steel is going to find its place and move up the tier 2 ladder. Amber Steel aggro. I think it's a little high right now. It's kind of, I do have one of these deck lists to go over today too. I think it kind of just popped up and people liked it and is cool, but as the format goes on and stabilizes, I expect this deck to come down a little, maybe even fall into that high tier rogue status. Then we have Amethyst Steel Control. This is another deck that I had pretty high hopes on. I said it could be a strong tier 2 deck. Will it be? I think it's going to hang out in that mid tier 2 range. I don't think it'll fall much lower, but at the end of the day, it's going to still kind of stay there. Amethyst Emerald Agro, barely clinging on to that tier 2 status. I think it's going to drop into the rogue category. A lot of aggro decks I just think are naturally going to be in rogue. Jafar Wheel, I hope it stays on the back of tier 2. I think it has potential to, and if it's getting this much play, usually the biggest thing for me with Jafar decks are they just don't see enough play, because if you don't see enough play, odds are you're not getting as many tops. If you're not getting as many tops, well, I don't count you on the list then, because my list is based off of tops and percentages, not thoughts and feelings. I think it has potential to stay up there, though. It's going to be low tier 2, but I think it can stay there. Amber Amethyst, I actually expect this deck to go more into the middle to mid-high tier 2. It's sitting at about 2% right now. I think this deck is going to kind of stabilize as the format goes on in that like 4 to 7% range of top cut. So I think it's going to actually creep up and do a bit better. And then we can go ahead and get into our rogue category decks. Ben, I know you said I was too low on this deck, said it's got to go higher. Go get us some tops. Let's get it up there higher. Blurple in the rogue. Every rogue deck right now has one top. So, I mean, I guess you could say Emerald Steel Damage Control, which is instead of focusing on discard, you focus on things like Beast Relentless, the Robin Hood package to use the damage aspect of the game to control your opponent that way. But we got Blurple in here. We got Amber Steel Steel Fossa. You have Ruby Amber, the Simba aggro deck, where you have the aggro Ruby Simba on turn 2, also the Bodyguard Amber Simba on turn 2, and then you have the Shift 3 5-cost Amber new Simba that readies all your other characters. So it's kind of like a Simba aggro deck, if you will. Amethyst Steel, another Amethyst Steel. I think that's our 4th one in here now. Brooms, Mickey's Brooms is in there. Amber Emerald Lemon Lime discard. We just said the Emerald Steel damage deck. Amber Sapphire, that's hero support deck where they just kind of piggyback off of helping each other out. I'm going to go ahead and quest for a couple and then give my strength to this guy. And this one's going to go ahead and either challenge or gain other abilities based on their strength levels. Amber Sapphire support is in there, and then Amber Steel truly locations. Unlike the aggro one where sometimes they're only playing 4 Dwarven Mines, this is the one like from the DLC that had most recently happened where it's actually focused on the location aspect. So which decks are gonna, well, none of them can go lower than Rogue. Are there decks that are gonna fade off though? Are they gonna, as like next month, is there any of these decks that might just not top at all? I would say Brooms, Damage Control, and Support are probably the most likely to do that. I think Damage Control will get a top. I think Brooms and Support do fall off, but throughout the entirety of the format, I do expect both of them to at least get one more in there. I think Blurple is the most likely to move up. I think it can be a mid to low tier 2 deck. Steel Fossa, it just isn't going to have the play. The deck actually costs a lot too, and for what it's worth, it's just not worth that much, but it's going to stay a rogue deck. It'll probably get a few more here and there as the format goes on. Simba aggro is a fun one, and it's a new style. It's not a new strategy because aggro's kind of been around the block of time or two, but it's a new way to do it, and I think for that reason I could see people latching onto this and trying it out a little bit more. But it's still going to stay in that rogue category. Amber Emerald discard. This deck absolutely I could see going into tier 2. I did say out of the 3 discard decks, I think it is the worst one. I think it's like low tier 2 this format. I think it, in the grand scheme of things, I think got worse. Its tools are nice, but I think other decks just got better. So I'm going to say low tier 2 to high rogue for this deck. Damage control is going to stay in that like mid rogue. Like I said, support could be probably the most likely one to fall off here. Amber Steel locations. Again, I think that there's just other ways to do it, especially now with the more just Dwarven Mine aggro not super location focused deck, I think that this version might start to fail off a little bit. So, what decks would I say are really good that have not topped yet? This is a small sample size, by the way. Usually by the end of formats, we're at like 1,500 examples. We're not even 10% of the way there. So, what decks would I say are still good? What decks would I try out? What decks would I trust in? I think that Sapphire Emerald discard is very strong. I think that that is absolutely a deck that could be into the low to mid tier 2. I expect that deck fully to top and move up the charts a little bit. So I do think we will see that deck popping up here in December. In addition to that, Ruby Steel, I think whether you want to play Pirates, Actions, or just playing the best cards, like I've tried preaching to people, and I've had a few listen and go and get their prize cards and or promo cards, I should say. Prize cards to me feels more like a DLC, not set championships. But I think Ruby Steel has solid potential this format too, to be able to do quite a few nice things. And I don't know, the Blue Steel Combat deck is actually pretty fun. Is it going to be anything more than Rogue? I don't see that happening. However, you never know what it holds. So that's kind of my thoughts on the format and moving forward and the decks that are performing. Let's go ahead and look at a few deck lists. So the first one we're going to look over is an Amethyst Emerald Tempo deck. How do I like this deck? And what makes it different than the Agro one, right? I guess first and foremost, as far as like the aggro portion, you see the 4 Curse Merfolk, the 1 Banzai. Outside of that, though, there's not a lot of multi-questers. You do have the Genie on turn 4, and obviously Big Ursula, but you're not loading up on those aggressive cards. Odds are, if you're playing a more AE aggro, you're probably going to be playing more Banzais, more early disruption cards, possibly like a Befuddle. You might see Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom in there as well. There's just more early questing presence that you could go for, whereas this one is taking more advantage because of things like Kit, like Lyle. You have just cards like that to truly take advantage of it. So turn 1, what do we all have? We have 3 Followers, 1 Diablo. These are kind of your draw engine cards on turn 1. The 4 Curse Merfolk, because you do want to try and hit an aggressive start if you can. And then your 4 Freds. So Fred does kind of work in that aggro aspect as well, because when this character is challenged, you get 2 lore. And it's obviously he's probably going to lose the challenge because he's a 1/1 stat line, but he can sit there and quest for 1, and if they don't remove him, well, he's just going to keep questing for 1. And when they finally remove him, either they use one of their songs or removal cards, or you're going to get 2 free lore. So it just applies like a weird pressure, kind of in a way like Prince Eric in Ruby, the 4-cost uninkable card does. Not for the same reason, because obviously he banishes a character when they remove it, but this one gets you the lore. It's just one of those cards that makes your opponent kind of have to work around and feel, do things differently. I guess Eric's kind of a bad example too, because it doesn't have to just be challenged. He could just, when he's banished. So, but in that regard, just kind of making your opponent think about it when they're doing it. The 1 Banzai, again, just another card like that can quest out good. And the 3 Strength puts your opponent in that, once again, that weird spot. Trying to keep uninkable count a little bit low. What do we have? 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 14. 14's not too bad, though. 14, where would I go for uninkable count this deck? I'd try to be in that like 11 to 15 range, so 14 right near the top. Go-Go Tamago, evasive 2/2, and when you play this character, you can pay 2 ink and gain lore equal to the damage on chosen opposing character. So, in a way, tempo can be aggressive, and if it's turn 4 or later, your Go-Go, once again, if there's a character that's damaged, you can go ahead and get free lore by playing this character, pay the 2 ink, and then get that lore. So it's another way to gain lore immediately, kind of like your goat is. So that's actually a really nice option, especially later game, assuming they have a character that's damaged. The evasive 2/2 line means it deals with Diablo. It means that your opponent's got to do something to remove it. Otherwise, he's just going to keep questing for that 1 lore over and over again as well. Again, just applying that good pressure to your opponent and controlling the pace of the game. Four snakes. We're not to fox yet. Four snakes, pretty standard. Four Ursulas, again, standard. Kit and Lyle, we saw these ratios in the last format kind of jumping. Was it 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 2 and 3, 2 and 2? We see this player decide to go 2 and 2. Obviously, Kit's resetting your opponent's tempo, bouncing their card, and Lyle forcing the Reckless on them, and also the lore drop when characters are banished. So both have different options, but they help control the pace and flow of the game. Four Foxes, pretty standard. Crab, this deck can struggle to deal with bigger threats, so 3 crabs. Genie, one of the new additions from the Azurite Sea. He's a 2/4 evasive, which is actually a really nice stat line, by the way. But when you play this character, you draw a card. So it's basically Rabbit on play, but it quests for 2. It's a 2/4, and you just don't get the draw when it leaves. But that's okay because he's evasive and he's questing for 2. So it really makes your opponent need to come up with that answer. And worst case scenario, you still got to draw that card when it was played. So no matter what, you at least get something out of it. 4 Goat, 4 Rabbit, not a whole lot to talk about there. 3 Elsa, the evasive, the rush, being able to exert a character on play, all very strong abilities. Big Ursula then, you do have Little Ursula, so you can shift her, slowing down your opponent's songs. We just kind of went over the not pie chart, but we went over the spreadsheet, and Steel Song is really good right now. Who would have thought? Making them hardcast their songs, also very good. And when she quests, you can exert an opposing character. Very good. Again, controlling the flow, controlling the tempo, dictating the pace of the game is what this deck is striving to do. We got 4 friends on the other sides, and then the 1 Emerald Chromacon. So whenever one of your characters is banished, you may return a chosen character to the player's hand. So essentially, it's a way to interact with your opponent on their turn. No Maleficent Staff to pair up with it here, where when you return their characters, you get the lore. But that's not too surprising because outside of like Kit, you're not really playing the bounce package. You're not playing Mother Knows Best. You're not playing like a bounce potentially. You're not playing more kits. Like you're not playing as many cards to bounce your opponent's cards. Genie being another one that can do it. So not too surprising to not see a Maleficent Staff in here. 2 libraries then as the location of choice. Just another nice little way to rack up some lore, 8 willpower, and be able to get potentially more draws, especially if you have your followers there. You quest, you pop the followers, you draw the card, and then you draw the card for your library. One more deck we'll go over real quick, and then that's going to be it for this one. We got the Agro, or an Agro, Amber Steel Diggy Diggy Hole by Brennan DiCandino, one of the premier players in the game, really. And I think that's why this deck is truly going to take off and people are going to like it, which it's a fun way to play it. I kind of messed around with it after seeing this, and it's like it's actually a really fun deck to play, especially if you like aggressive strategies that have other interaction, that have challenging, that have things you can do where it's not just turn card sideways. You have your songs that you can sing. You have the location where you can move characters there once per turn and ping. And if you move a knight character, you get to ping for 2 instead of the 1. Cinderella on 1 can almost make your opponent think that you're playing Steel Song. And in addition to that, she can sing your 2 songs that are damage dealing songs. So you just get some really good value there. Daisy Duck obviously being your aggressive card. You're happy on turn 1, which he's also a knight, so moving him to the 7 Dwarves Mine is going to be really good there. Gaining evasive during your turn otherwise isn't a bad thing to have. Calhoun, one of the best new cards out of the set. Doc, obviously a draw card. He's a knight card, so he does a couple different things there for you. Zombie Lilo then, with the ability to pay 2 ink at the start of your turn to bring her back from your discard exerted, can be really good. Keep in mind, if your opponent has a Calhoun out, do not do that. You're just giving them a free lore because they're going to take no damage because they resist 1. Smee and Piglet as your other aggressive 2-drop characters. Then on 3, you have Lawrence, who not only can have 4 strength, quest for 2, P to slow down your opponent's actions. You're trying to win quick. You want to stop things like grab your swords and big threat action cards. Then I am really struggling here. I need a drink of water. We have Pluto Guard Dog, the new bodyguard. 4 Rapunzels, because healing your characters is really nice and drawing your cards is even nicer. These songs that pair up with Cinderella and just help protect your board. And then again, the Dwarven Mine, where you can ping the damage, protect your board, and gain the passive lore. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Take care.